A few weeks ago, I sat down and told you that I was taking on the Big Butte Challenge, climbing 8 buttes between Memorial Day and Labor Day, and each one garners you a token that can be redeemed at a local brewery. I did Pilot Butte, Smith Rock, Overturf Butte, and Barnes Butte. And now it's time to pick up where I left off.
Bessie Butte is another one of our cinder cones from Newberry Volcano. One way of thinking of this, think of an aspen tree. You could have an aspen in your neighbor's yard, and in your yard, probably every year you're chopping out little aspen shoots that are shooting up. Those are genetic clones of that same aspen tree. In a similar fashion, all these cinder cones on the flanks of Newberry, like Bessie Butte, like Lava Butte, they're clones, so to speak, of Newberry Volcano.
At the top of Bessie Butte, you'll actually find some benches to rest on. One even asks a great question: who exactly was Bessie? According to the Deschutes Historical Museum, Bessie Wilkinson was the second ever telephone operator in Bend, and pretty much the only reason they named the butte after her was because she happened to live in the area. But that's okay. Thanks for the climb, Bessie. Gotta say, you got a nice butte. Tumalo Mountain is one of my go-to hikes, but it always makes me nervous, because it's one heck of a climb.
From the top of Tumalo Mountain, if you look to the west or the north, you see all these tall, pointy volcanoes. Imagine 20,000 years ago in the height of the Pleistocene, what you're actually gonna see is a sea of ice, a vast plateau of ice with tiny little volcano islands sticking up out of this ice. One of those vast seas of ice, one of those rivers of ice, a glacier, flowed down from Tumalo Mountain. If you're standing on the top of Tumalo, you look to the east, you have a big bowl in front of you. Fabulous skiing in the winter, pretty impressive looking in the summer. That was the nursery of a glacier, what geologists call a glacial cirque. And that glacier scooped out half of Tumalo Mountain.
Yeah, it's a heck of a climb, but it's also a heck of a view.
I did it.
Oh, and little did I know, this weird-looking foundation thingy at the top, that was a fire lookout tower that was built in 1948 and decommissioned in 1968. Next up is Paulina Peak, the highest point remaining of one of the largest eruptions in North American history. It's the largest volcano in the Cascades, named after the famous physician-turned-geologist, Mr. John Strong Newberry.
Back in the day, maybe a couple 100,000 years ago, there would have been a much bigger volcano in front of you, and you would have been on the flanks of it. And that volcano had a huge eruption, collapsed, and made this big hole in the ground that today we call Newberry Volcano. We were talking about how Newberry's by volume the largest volcano in the Cascades. Doesn't look like it from Paulina Peak, and that's because it's not just the big hole in the ground in front of you. It's all the hundreds of cinder cones that dot its flanks.
Now, Paulina Peak was named after Chief Paulina, who was a Paiute Indian chief who wanted nothing to do with life on a reservation.
And in 1859, he's actually captured in a raid conducted jointly by Warm Springs and local white settlers and sent to imprisonment at Fort Dalles.
And he will be the topic of an entire upcoming Little Did I Know. But for now, let's move on to the final butte.
Black Butte's impressively tall, and yet it's got perfect cone form. Black Butte's plenty old enough to have been glaciated. It survived ice ages. It's an old mountain. Yet, it's perfect in form. It has not been scooped out by the glaciers.
Because it's symmetrical, it looks like a young volcano, but it's old and lucky.
Basically, it was far enough east that the big, massive sea of ice that was growing over the Central Cascades never made it to Black Butte. So Black Butte was able to be spared by the glaciation, which is why it still looks like a perfect cinder cone.
There's a recently refurbished old-school lookout on display up there, and also a currently active one keeping a constant 360-degree eye on Central Oregon. And what other way to celebrate the summiting of this iconic butte? I wonder what other things this butte has inspired over the years. You know, climbing these 8 buttes has shown me that Central Oregon is a pretty amazing place, especially when you realize how much you didn't know. Scott Elness, Central Oregon Daily News.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on more videos from Central Oregon Daily News. And for more news from the high desert, just visit centraloregondaily.com.